jack. On that note, let's take a quick break. Don't go anywhere, because we'll have an exclusive interview with Charlie Kupfer coming up next. He's the author of Something Magic, the Baltimore Orioles, 1979 to 1983. It's coming up next on Beyond the Game on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
We first opened about 10 years ago. We were small, just a few of us, but it was exciting. I always dreamt of having my own business. It was kind of slow at first, but things started picking up. We had big plans, but in our wildest dreams, we never thought we'd have this much work. Yeah, with so many businesses caught off guard by the storm, Reed Waste Management has never been busier.
What will become of your business after a disaster? Nearly 2/3 of businesses aren't prepared for an emergency, and 40% of businesses that experience a disaster never recover. Make an emergency plan now before it's too late. For a free online tool that helps you develop an emergency plan to keep your business up and running should disaster strike, visit ready.gov/business. Brought to you by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the American Red Cross, and the Ad Council.
Yeah.
Hey, check it out. I'm gonna need you to turn up your volume.
No. I'm supposed to say that. Come on. Hey, look, check it out. It's your guy, DJ Steph, the saucy man himself. Tune into It's Saucy, where I play nothing but hip-hop and reggae music.
1, 2, 3, hit that!
Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. on the Voice of Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC.
Listen!
Technology moves at the speed of innovation, and today, that's lightning fast. So when you get your hands on the latest tech, don't forget to do the right thing with your old devices. Recycle them. The Consumer Technology Association and its members are making recycling your old tech device as easy as purchasing new ones. Just go to greenergadgets.org, type in your zip code, and you'll instantly find the responsible recycling location closest to your home. You'll also find lots of tips to simplify your recycling, like asking the store where you buy your new TV if they'll haul away your old one. Television sets, video game consoles, smartphones, tablets. They're all recyclable. Don't let them clog up your local landfill. Just visit greenergadgets.org. You're sharp enough to get the latest tech tools into your home. Now be responsible enough to get your old devices to the recycler. That's greenergadgets.org.
You are listening to Beyond the Game on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I am Jacob Volk. Sitting across from me, Dominic Arbolino, Eric Fischetti, and Joe Ardita. And we are fortunate enough to be joined by Charlie Kupfer, the author of Something Magic, the Baltimore Orioles, 1979 to 1983. Charlie, how are you?
I'm great, and I'm glad to hear from you guys, and it's fun to be a part of it. Thanks.
No, thank you. So, what can you tell us about Al Bunbury?
Well, I'll tell you. I can tell you plenty. Like any fan of any team, I could go on and on and on and on and tell you more than you'd want to know, and I'll refrain from doing that.
Thank you.
But, you know, Bunbury was an interesting figure. He was Rookie of the Year when he first came up. I believe it was 73. He was older than a lot of players, that are rookies, because he was a veteran of the Vietnam War, and he was a fan favorite, including a favorite of mine. He didn't have a great arm, but he was really fast. He could get to the ball, and he just had a kind of infectious, sunny personality. And he's one of the only Orioles that was generally well regarded as a base stealer. This has not been a team of speed merchants traditionally, so he was one of the best in that regard for the Orioles too.
All right, so can you lay out for us the career of Rich Dower?
Well, yeah, Rich Dower, it's funny you say Rich Dower. I talk about him quite a bit, and he's been in the news lately because of his brush with death. Thank heavens he recovered and is doing well at the Astros World Series championship
That's
parade.
right. I heard about that. Yeah, he was a coach for that
I mean,
team.
it couldn't have been any more serious than it was. Unfortunately, he's up and about and doing well. But to me, this is how I always think about Dower. If you can imagine the luxury of just taking an important position like second base and saying every game for a number of years, oh, we don't have to think about that. He's got it covered. I mean, Dower was not a superstar. All he did was suck up any ball that was reasonably close to second. All he did was never make a mistake in the field. He was a good but not excellent hitter. Probably maybe even good is stretching it a little bit, but when he first came up, he was highly touted out of Southern California, and I still remember one of the magazine articles described him as going 0 for April and 1 for May. But they hung in there with him because they told him that his glove was important, and he was a luxury. A player like that, lots of teams have them. The fans of other teams don't look at the guy and think he's a superstar, but man, you're just so fortunate to be able to keep that guy in the lineup day in, day out, get nothing but solid play.
And again, he really did sound like a luxury, but would you be able to describe to us the career of the late and great Mike Flanagan?
Yes, and Flanny is a guy who, for Oriole fans, it's very bittersweet. He was a funny guy. He had a mordant sense of humor. It was always dark, but not in a gloomy way. Just maybe sardonic is the way to put it. He was an excellent hurler. I mean, a guy who really just brushed superstardom, but didn't quite achieve it. And nevertheless, when you look at his numbers, you think like, man, this guy was great. And of course, we know that in later years, and I'm a fan of this club, and when they were bad for a long time. And they brought Flanagan in what a lot of people thought was sort of a PR move, and he had some broadcasting role, and he began to move into management, and there was a lot of hope that Flanagan might be one of the guys who could help the team turn it around. And I think he hoped it, and it's pretty clear, and I don't say this in a disparaging way, but in a sort of clinical way, that he had some, whether it was a mood disorder or something, he had a struggle with mental health, and I think eventually the losing got to him, and he shot himself. It's very tragic. Oriole fans still think of him with a lot of joy and respect. I would say, thankfully, the sadness of his demise at his own hand hasn't kind of clouded his career, but the loss of Flanagan as an Oriole alum still hurts me, and I think it hurts a lot of people who remember him as a good guy, not just a good ball player.
I was actually in Baltimore when he died, and it was a really surreal mood at Camden Yards that night.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. Baltimore it's always been a sort of peculiar kind of place, and I say that with love in my heart. I mean, this is the place that gave us John Waters, the movie maker, and, H.L. Mencken and other kind of iconoclastic figures. And one thing Baltimore likes to do is obsess over its past. I think Baltimore was probably 2 days old when people started saying, the old Baltimore was better than the new Baltimore. So I think Flanagan was a part of really the most wonderful period in the franchise's history, or at least one of two great periods. And he was sort of always associated with that. And there's something about lost glory, and Flanagan was definitely someone that fans liked a lot. He would be the spokesman for the team. He would be the comedian. They used to have a player named Jose Mesa. And so Flanagan started translating that into English and called him Joe Table. It's a silly joke, but everybody liked it, thought it was funny. That was Flanagan right there.
That is funny.
I mean, he seems like a really great guy. It's unfortunate what happened to him. But moving forward in the timeline here, you talked about some of the failures of Baltimore, the Orioles in the past, but they were able to win the title in 1983, and they did get some success in the early 80s. So what can you tell us about four-time All-Star pitcher Dennis El Presidente Martinez?
Well, a lot of Dennis's glory lay ahead of him with the Orioles. But, he was on the 83 World Series team, and he was there for a number of years before that. And Dennis came up through the Orioles system. So if you were an Oriole fan, and let's say it was the early 1980s, you thought that there was a constitutional amendment in place that said the Baltimore Orioles farm system shall deliver every 2 or 3 years a Cy Young caliber pitcher. And you looked at Dennis Martinez and said, yep, right on schedule. And he was interesting to people because he was from Nicaragua. And for an interesting little period, the Orioles were sort of Nicaragua's team at the time of the Sandinista revolution. There was a movie that came out, and one of the characters in the movie was this revolutionary who was running around in an Oriole hat. I remember not knowing much about Nicaragua, but thinking like, well, that's probably a pretty good place. They seem to like the Orioles, So the Orioles even went down there and played an exhibition game, as I recall. And so Martinez was a big part of opening that country up at an interesting time in its history to major league awareness. And I think the idea of El Presidente came from that. He sort of became like the ambassador from Nicaragua to the world of baseball. And so he was, in a sense, kind of representing his country all along during his career. And he battled alcohol abuse in Baltimore, and that was kind of the reason why around 83 his statistics took a nosedive. And he showed a lot of courage in fighting addiction. He took it seriously. He was very upfront about it. He began to take better care of his health, and he refrained from using and from drinking, and he rediscovered the pitching mojo that made him such a great hurler.
Talking to Charlie Kupfer, the author of Something Magic, the Baltimore Orioles, 1979 to 1983. So, can you lay out for us the career of the former Yankee farmhand, Scott McGregor?
I sure can. I'll tell you one thing right now. My heart is pained that you brought that up, because I had to turn down an invitation tonight to go to an event in York, Pennsylvania, where Scott McGregor is going to be speaking and signing autographs.
Oh!
I have a 1983 ball that lacks Scott McGregor's name, and boy, would I like to get down there. But duty calls, right? I got a class tonight, so. Yeah, Scotty came over from the Yankees, and there was this enormous... now, I tell people from Boston this, and they don't believe me, but in the 70s, it wasn't just the Red Sox, although everybody remembers Bucky Dent, and I like to remind Boston fans of that as often as possible. But the Orioles were a real rival to the Yankees, too. And so when the Orioles and the Yankees made a huge flop, and a young Scotty McGregor came over, nobody was really sure what to make of it, and he fit right in. He was, one of the Yankees' better pitching prospects. And McGregor was a very soft-spoken guy, and, he was very, very grounded. He was also, and I believe remains, a very religious guy. In other words, he wasn't great copy for the newspapers, but he, to my mind, was the real anchor of that staff. He was the guy that you went to, and you knew that he wasn't going to get too high, he wasn't going to get too low. He wasn't a speedball guy. He was more of a control guy. He had command that was superb, and he mixed up his pitches. McGregor was just as close to a problem-free number one as any staff is likely to get, and yet he wasn't thought of as having pizzazz. All he did was win.
All right, so would you be able to describe to us the career of Eddie Murray?
Well, yeah. Now, to me, Eddie is, give or take, Frank Robinson, maybe Brooks and Cal and Jim Palmer. Eddie is clearly a contender for the best Oriole ever. And Eddie came up through the Oriole farm system, and he was a young man, came out of Rochester, had been a teammate of Cal. He grew up in poor circumstances in Southern California. And Eddie was the heart of this iteration of the Orioles. There's no doubt about it. And he was Rookie of the Year, and he was, there's a wonderful and really funny and profane Earl Weaver rant that people like to watch on YouTube, where he's arguing with an umpire And
you do that again, I'll punch you right in your nose.
Yeah, you got it. Well, if you look at the very beginning of that, and that rant happens in the first inning of the game. Actually, it was the second inning of the game. What Murray's really, what Weaver's really trying to do is to protect Murray.
Yeah.
He's getting in there and protecting Eddie so that Eddie won't get thrown out. You know, Weaver thought, and he knew they can win without me, but we don't win without Eddie. and for